Shalom, shalom, shalom to the house of Israel. Shalom and peace to the scattered 12 tribes of Jacob, scattered to the four corners of the world as promised by our Father in Deuteronomy 28. I give all praises and honor to my Father, Almighty Yah, coming to redeem his children in the name of Yeshua, the King of Israel. It's a pleasure to be before you. Family and friends, I'm really excited to be before you today. It's been a long time since I posted anything in regards to the scriptures, but I haven't been relaxing at all. I've been working hard, studying it and studying and studying till my eyes are sore. And y'all willing, today we're going to start a series entitled Shaul's Israelite Letters, Apostle Shaul's Israelite Letters. First and foremost, before we get into the lesson, as always, I want to put my disclaimer out there for the people to be fair. The following presentation may be offensive to some people, and to be righteous and to be fair, I want to give everyone a chance to exit this presentation. If you just stumbled on here by accident, or if you stumbled on just to be nosy, I want to be fair and give you a chance to exit because this presentation may be offensive. So if the following applies to you, you may want to turn this presentation off. If you are offended or bored by reading the scriptures verbatim, meaning as they were written, with nothing added, nothing taken away, no performance, no hooping and hollering, this presentation may be offensive or boring to you, and you may want to exit the presentation. If you esteem the words of your pastor, your preacher, your first lady, your bishop, your priest, your rabbi, if you esteem the words of a man over the words of the Most High, then this presentation may be offensive and you may want to exit the presentation. If you only read your Bibles on Sunday morning, then this presentation may be offensive, it may be over your head, and it may be boring to you, so you may want to exit the presentation. If you do not like to hear that what we learn inside Sunday churches is pagan and false doctrine, this presentation may be offensive to you, and again, you may want to exit the presentation. But if you really wish to have some information to springboard your own study, and you want to find out the truth for yourselves, then this presentation is something you want to tune into and follow us. So be sure to go on YouTube, find us on YouTube, the Torah Group 12, and subscribe to the channel, share with your family and friends. But again, this information is just your springboard for you to get some information and do your own research. Do not take my word for anything. Take this information and start your own research. But first and foremost, have a humble heart and go to Almighty Yah and ask him to reveal these things to you and see if they hold true or not was what's written in the book. So we're going to start this segment going over Shaul's letter to the Romans. And if you grew up inside Sunday churches like myself, you grew up and you were taught that Apostle Paul or Shaul was converted. He became he changed his way of life from being a persecutor of the Hebrews who believed in the Messiah. He became a champion for the Messiah. And the church taught us that Apostle Shaul went to the tribe of Judah And the tribe of Judah, known as the Jews, they rejected him. And once the Jews rejected him, the church taught us that the Messiah sent Paul to the Gentiles. And these Gentiles were foreign nations. And these foreign nations became a new adopted Christian church. But what we're going to show you, y'all willing, we're going to go over some actual Hebrew root words, and then we're going to examine the intimate language of Paul's letters to show you that Paul knew he wasn't writing to strange nations. Apostle Shaul knew he was writing to scattered Israelites now living in other cities and going by different names, and they are steeped or indoctrinated into Greek culture. So when he mentions the Greeks or the Gentiles, he knew very well he was talking to his brothers of the northern tribe of Israel, known as Israel or Ephraim. So we're going to get into it, but first, let's read the verses that the church taught us proves Paul went to the foreign nations. And the first one we're going to go to is Acts chapter 9 and verse 15. So if you got your scroll, I recommend you do have your Bible anytime someone is before you. So go to Acts chapter 9, and we're going to start at verse 15, and we're going to start getting some understanding. So this is Acts chapter 9, verse 15, and it says, "But the Lord said unto him, Go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel." Verse 16, "For I will show him how great things he must suffer for my name's sake." So if you take the time to go back to the beginning of chapter 9, you'll get the backstory. The Messiah is already resurrected, but he goes and appears to another Israelite, and he tells this Israelite, Ananias, to prepare his heart to receive Apostle Shaul. And Apostle Shaul, at this time, he's known by Shaul or Saul. And Ananias is telling the Messiah, Father, we heard of Apostle Paul or Shaul. He's been killing people. He's been killing everybody who confesses your name. And Messiah tells Ananias, no worries, that this Apostle Paul is reserved to do a mission for me. He's going to bear my name before the Gentiles. And this is where the Christian church tell us that Paul is sent to the foreign nations. We're going to pick it up again and show you the other place. And the other place is Acts chapter 21. Acts chapter 21, and we're going to pick it up at 17. Acts 21 and verse 17. And it reads, 21 and 17. So this is Paul giving his background. It says, "And when we were come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. And the day following, Paul went in unto us, unto James, and all the elders were present." Verse 19. "And when he had saluted them, he declared particularly what things God had wrought among the Gentiles by his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord and said unto him, Thou seest, brother, how many things of Jews there are. How many thousands of Jews there are which believe, and they are all zealous of the law." Verse 21. "And they informed of thee that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses." So this is Paul's history where he's starting to teach, and they're using words like Gentiles, and this has brought many confusion, a lot of confusion, because people think Paul is talking to real Gentiles. So let's get it in Acts 11, where actually the Messiah speaks to Paul or Shaul from heaven, and he gives Shaul his commission. So this is Acts 11 and 20. Acts 11 and 20. "And some of them were men of Cyprus and Cyrene, which when they were come to Antioch, spake unto the Grecians, preaching the Lord Jesus." So Acts 11:20, you find another word, and the word is called Grecians. So we're going to go over these words, Grecians, and we're going to go over the word Greek to bring some understanding that Paul knew who he was talking to. He was talking to Hebrew Israelites and not actual foreign nations. Not foreign nations. So before we get into the scriptures, we have to go over some history to bring some understanding how Paul knew who he was talking to. So, for years and years and years, the church have taught Paul's letters and just told us that he was talking to foreign nations. But we're going to show you real quickly that he wasn't. Can you give me? Oh wow, I leaked that dictionary. So you know what, babe? No, you don't have to do it. So if you have access to the Zondervan Dictionary, Bible Dictionary, Zondervan's Bible Dictionary, I am going to read that. I'm going to read it verbatim. I'm sorry. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about the lie. Just move it. So I'm going to read to you the definition of a Grecian from the Zondervan's Bible Dictionary. And if you don't have access to it in your own library, you can Google this online. I think they have a PDF. Thank you, Queen. They have a PDF of this, and this is the Zondervan's Compact Bible Dictionary. And I'm going to read to you the definition of a Grecian, because we find the word used in the New Testament, and we just read it in Acts 11 and 20. So I'm going to go to page 207 out of the Zondervan Bible Dictionary. I'm going to read to you the definition that all the scholars know that refers to Grecians. So this is the definition of Grecian. It says Greece, Grecia, or Grecians. Grecia is Greece, the home of the Hellenes. Greeks and Grecians, however, are to be distinguished. It says Greeks and Grecians are to be distinguished. It says Greeks are generally those of Hellenic race, but the word may be used to indicate non-Jews, foreigners, and aliens. Grecians were Greek-speaking Jews, folk of the dispersion from areas predominantly Greek. I'm going to read that again. The Grecians are not Greeks. Grecians were Greek-speaking Jews, folk of the dispersion. So, in a nutshell, and we're going to get to the history, when the Bible uses the word Grecian, it's referring to the Hebrew Israelites who were indoctrinated and had that Greek culture forced upon them by the threat of the sword. So they took on Greek language, they took on Greek customs, the Olympics, the gymnasiums, naked exercises. That's what gymnasium means. They even removed their circumcision and went around as they were uncircumcised men. That's what a Grecian is. In contrast to a Greek is actually someone that is a blood-born relative or descendant of the Hellenes. You have to be careful when Shaul is using Greek and Grecians or Gentile. You have to put it in context and find out which context he's using. So let's get into it. And let me give you an example of when Shaul uses the context of Greek in the same passage, and it's confusing. Sometimes he changes context in the very same verse, and you don't know if he's talking about a true Greek or a Hebrew Gentile Greek who's really an Israelite. So let's go to Romans chapter 11. Romans 11, and we're going to pick it up at the 11th verse. And we're going to show you how he uses the words in the same passage. So this is Romans 11 and 11. And Paul writes, I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? God forbid. But rather through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy. Verse 12. Now, if the fall of them be the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? For I speak to you Gentiles, in as much as I am the apostle of the Gentiles. So let's make some sense to this. Verse 12, Paul says, if the diminishing of them, meaning if the fall of the tribe of Judah be the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness shall be. Then he says, I speak to you Gentiles as much as I am an apostle of the Gentiles. So Paul just said in one verse, Judah fell so the Gentiles, meaning the real non-Israelites, can have the fullness, so they can be blessed or have the riches of the world. And then he turns around and says, I'm the apostle of you Gentiles. Well, if you do the research, and we're going to go over in this series, Paul was not talking to wealthy men. In one verse, verse 11 or verse 12, he's telling you that these Gentiles are going to reign until their fullness be satisfied. And then verse 13, he says, I speak to you Gentiles. It's confusing. So he's telling you these foreign governments are going to rule as part of the curses of Deuteronomy 28 over the Israelite nation until the Most High has satisfied their rule. And then verse 12, he says, verse 13, he says, I speak to you Gentiles. Well, those Gentiles he was speaking to were not ruling the world. He's speaking to people in bondage under Roman authority, but they had just came out of Greek captivity. So he's speaking to Hebrew Gentiles or Hebrew Greeks or Hebrew Grecians who are actually the house of Jacob. So you see how confusing that could be if you don't have the proper context of the word Gentile and Greek and Grecians. It's totally confusing. But we're hopefully with the power with the Most High, we're going to try to make some understanding out of this. So let's get into it. Let's go down to even verse 25 through 27, the same chapter. Romans 11, verse 25. He says, For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. I don't know about you, but let's put some common sense on this. So Apostle Paul is talking to me, a Gentile. And he just tells me that Israel, which was known as a mighty kingdom in all the East, he's telling me, a Gentile, that listen, Israel is just going to be blinded in part for a bit until the Gentiles, your people, their fullness come in. Meaning after the Most High is done with the Gentiles, letting them rule, you're going to be taken back down by these same Israelites that you're ruling. Why, if I'm a true Gentile, why continue to entertain Apostle Paul? It makes no sense historically, and it makes no sense biblically. Let's continue on. Verse 26. I'm reading Romans 11, verse 26. And he says, And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written. When you read those phrases, as it is written, it's referring, he's about to quote a prophet. So he just says all Israels will be saved. If I'm a true Gentile, why am I going to entertain him telling me how this mighty kingdom of Israel is going to be salvaged or saved and restored? Why I'm going to entertain him? And I know I'm not an Israelite. And I know what their nation, how their nation has ruled and dominated all of the East. He says, And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, There shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. He's making it be known he's talking to the seed of Jacob or the house of Jacob. He's talking to Israelites. If I'm a true Gentile, a stranger of Israel, Why am I going to continue to listen to this man's letter or read this man's letter? Verse 27. For this is my covenant unto them when I shall take away their sins. Again, this is intimate language. He says, this is my covenant with them. What covenant? The covenant that was sealed under Moses, the covenant that was made with the house of Israel. You cannot read nowhere in the book where any other nation became in covenant partnership relationship with the Most High, but Israel. And we're just scratching the surface. We're going to go through each one of Paul's letters and show you how the language and the phrases is all specific to the tribe of Israel, the 12 tribes scattered abroad. All praise to our Father for keeping his word, redeeming the house of Israel. So, we got to go over some history to put things in context. So, I read to you the definition of a Grecian out of the Zondervan's Bible Dictionary. And it used a phrase, the folk of the dispersion. From here on out, when you read the word scattered, dispersed, gathered, I want you to burn it in your memory. It's only referring to the house of Israel. And now I'm going to prove it to you by the scriptures. Let's turn to the book of Yohanan or John 7. Let's go to John chapter 7. And we're going to read John 7 and 35. When you hear the phrases, the dispersed, scattered, and gathering, is only referring to the house of Israel. So I'm going to read to you John 7, and I'm going to start at 33. This is John chapter 7, verse 33. Then said Yeshua unto them, Yet a little while I am with you, and then I go unto him that sent me. Verse 34. Ye shall seek me, and shall not find me, and where I am thither ye cannot come. Verse 35. Then said the Jews among themselves, Whither will he go that we shall not find him? Will he go unto the dispersed among the Gentiles? They're asking themselves, where is Jesus or Yeshua going to go that we can't find him? Is he going to go unto the dispersed that are among the Gentiles? So our Israelite forefathers knew that there were tribes of Israel already scattered among the Gentiles. So they're asking themselves, is Christ going to leave us and go teach the northern kingdom? That's what he means. So when you hear that word dispersed, gathered, and scattered, it's referring to the 12 tribes of Israel, our forefathers. Let's get it again. Let's go to James 1 and 1. Turn your script to James 1 and 1. And it really doesn't take all day to see this, but because of the church doctrine and the church theologians, the so-called theologians, we have to give you enough proof beyond a shadow of a doubt that Paul was talking to Hebrew Israelites and not foreign nations. So we're just going to read the introduction to James. This is James chapter 1, verse 1. And this is what James or Yaakov writes. He says, Yaakov or James, a servant of Yah and of Hamashiach Yeshua, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. So dispersed and scattered abroad are intimate, specific terms that only refer to the house of Israel. It was no secret that the house of Israel was scattered long before the slave ships. But the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes, were scattered first. Judah remained intact longer and remained in the land of Israel longer than the other tribes. But when you read dispersed and scattered, it's referring to the house of Israel. So All praises to our Father. So now let's give you some history. How does a Hebrew Israelite from the 12 tribes of Jacob become a Grecian or Greek? How can a Hebrew Israelite become a Greek or a Grecian? So to get that understanding, we have to go to the apocryphal books, and you can buy this online. I think $10, $11. This have the missing records of the Bible. The original King James 1611 had these books. I'm not here to argue about are they authentic, are they canonized. All that garbage that comes from foreign nations telling you about your history. That's a foreigner telling you about your family tree, and he's telling you what's valid about your family. I don't know about you, but I can't stand by and let a stranger who's not of my stock tell me of my stock. It's absolutely backwards. So I'm not here to argue whether these books are inspired or authorized. That's all ploys to keep you from reading these books. But we're going to turn to the book of Maccabees. And again, if you don't have this book, you can find it online. So we're going to show you how a Hebrew Israelite became a Greek when the kingdom of the Greeks took over the world. So we're going to read to you Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece." So Alexander took over the Persians and the Medes empire. And if you know Bible history, you know Cyrus was the king and then Darius took over, but their captives were some of our Israelite forefathers. So when Alexander took over the kingdoms, he inherited our forefathers. Now let's drop down and I'm going to show you how the Hebrew Israelites became Greeks. Drop down to verse 11. This is First Maccabees chapter 1 verse 11. It says, "In those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow." So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people, the Israelites, were so forward herein that they went to the king, the Greek king, who gave them license or permission to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Verse 14. "Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen or the Greeks." Verse 15. "And made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief." So some of our ancient Israelite fathers said, let's be like the heathens or the Greeks. We're going to build gymnasiums and we're going to remove our circumcision. We're going to hide our circumcision so when we walk around naked, we're going to appear to be like the Greeks. So I'm going to read to you an excerpt from an online article, and I'll post a link to this article, and I'm going to show you how wicked our ancestors were, and they forsook the covenant, the eternal covenant that the Father made with our nation, that we would forever circumcise every male of our household. So this is an article, and this is found from www.cirp.org. And I'll post a link to this article so you can read for yourself. It says, and this is about how they removed their circumcision. It says, "In contrast to the Jews, the Greeks and the Romans placed a high value on the prepuce. So it says the Greeks and the Romans, that foreskin around our gland, they valued that foreskin, unlike the Jews. It says, the Romans passed several laws to protect the prepuce by prohibiting circumcision. The laws were applied to everyone and were not directed against the Jews." So they said they wasn't just forbidden the Jews who were in their control to stop circumcision. The Romans and the Greeks told their whole provinces, every country they dominated, they outlawed circumcision because they valued that extra skin. Why did they value that extra skin? They value that extra skin because that extra skin has a lot of nerve endings that give you erotic sensations. And if you know about the Greeks and the Romans, they are filthy, idolatrous fornicators. They're all about pleasure and carnality. So once they realize that foreskin has a bunch of sensations, they say, hey, we can't get rid of that. Let's outlaw circumcision. So they wasn't trying to really just stunt on our forefathers. They just outlawed it for everybody. That skin gives us pleasure and we want it. So let's continue. It says, much later in the Hellenic period, about 140 CE, Jewish authorities modified circumcision procedure to make it impossible for a Jew to appear to be uncircumcised. So our forefathers had took the rest, those who were circumcised had took the remaining skin of their gland that they could, and they started a procedure to stretch it back over their gland so they can appear to be uncircumcised. So it's saying our Hebrew forefathers, they came up with a new method to make it harder for a Hebrew to appear like he's not circumcised. So they're trying to come up with a remedy for the wicked Israelites who are hiding their circumcision. It says, a radical new procedure called Pt.1 was introduced by the priests and rabbis. In this procedure, the foreskin was stripped away from the glands with which it is fused in the infant. In a painful procedure known today as synechotomy, more foreskin was removed than before, and the injury was correspondingly greater. So our forefathers says, I got an answer to these wicked Israelites. We're gonna adopt a new method where we're gonna take even more foreskin off. So now those wicked Israelites who were stretching the rest of their foreskin they had left to cover their gland, we're gonna take so much off that it's impossible to stretch any of your skin to make yourself look uncircumcised. That's what this article is saying. It says, with the introduction of Pt.1, the glands could not easily be recovered, and so no Jewish male would easily be able to appear as an uncircumcised Greek. This radical modified procedure eventually was adopted by the medical profession and is the circumcision operation used today. So all of us who are circumcised at birth, we're circumcised after the same method that our Israelite forefathers were using. Now they strip away all the foreskin, and they tell you they're doing it for health reasons, but our forefathers did it to stop those wicked Israelites who were trying to look like the Greeks. So that's how a Hebrew Israelite became a Grecian or a Gentile Greek. And these are the people Apostle Paul is writing to in all his epistles. They're just scattered among the European nations. And we're going to continue to give you information that you can study on your own. So let's go back to First Maccabees. I'm sorry. Let's go to okay. Here's some history you have to understand. In olden times, when one nation conquered another nation, they always conquered by their gods or their power. So if my country conquered your country, what that meant, my God is stronger and mightier than your God. Your God may be your God, but my God is greater, and your God is defeated by my God. So you can serve your God under me because my God is greater. So with that information, if Paul is writing to the Romans are now conquerors of Israel. Why would a Roman who just defeated you and took over your land want to serve your God? Now, in the Greek mind and in Christian mind, they're going to tell you that's the power of Jesus. But we're going to show you that that doesn't make sense historically or biblically. So let's give you some understanding about this. Let's go to Exodus chapter 5 and 1. Exodus chapter 5 and verse 1. I may have to stop for prayer. Exodus 5 and 1. And we're going to show you that in olden times, when you were conquered, your God was conquered. So this is Exodus 5 and 1. And afterwards Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. Verse 2. And Pharaoh said, Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I know not the Lord. Now, our Bible say the Lord, but in the ancient scripts, it says his name. So I'm going to read it like our forefathers wrote this. And Pharaoh said, Who is Yahuwah, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? I know not Yahuwah, neither will I let Israel go. So Pharaoh is telling Moses and Aaron, I don't know your God, or I don't know his power and his might, so I'm not letting you go. Let's go over to let me finish this up in verse 3. And they said, The Elohim, or the God of the Hebrews, have met with us. Let us go, we pray thee, 3 days' journey into the desert, and sacrifice unto Yah our Elohim, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or the sword. So they're just telling him, the God of the Hebrews is talking to you. That's who's talking to you. And again, Pharaoh's like, you're under my thumb. You're under my rule. Why should me, the Pharaoh, who's actually worshipped as a God himself, why should he bow down to your God when I have you in captivity? It makes no sense historically or biblically. The same thing when you read Paul's letter to the Romans. The Romans have defeated us. Why would a Roman worship a defeated God? We're going to give you some more examples. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 17. 1 Samuel chapter 17. 1 Samuel chapter 17, and we're going to pick it up at verse 45. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to you in the name of Yahuwah of hosts, the Elohim of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. We always went to war, and we told them who we're coming to war against them in the name of. Or better yet, more accurately, we told them, you're warring with our power, our Elohim. You're not warring with Moses. You're not warring against David. By you coming against me, you're coming against my God. And those other nations who were in control would scoff at us. Why should I bow down to you when my nation is greater than you? I'm going to give you more examples to let you know Paul writing to Romans who are now ruling the world does not make sense that they would want to serve the God of Israel. Let's go to 2 Kings chapter 18. 2 Kings chapter 18. 2 Kings 18, and we're going to pick it up at verse 28. 2 Kings 18, verse 28. Then Rashakab stood and cried with a loud voice in the Jews' language and spake, saying, Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus said the king, Let not Hezekiah deceive you, for he shall not be able to deliver you out of his hand. Verse 30. Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord or make you trust in Yahuwah, saying, The Lord will surely deliver us, and this city shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. Verse 31. Hearken not to Hezekiah, for thus saith the king of Assyria, Make agreement with me by a present, and come out to me, and then eat ye every man of his own vine. and every one of his fig tree, and drink ye every one of the waters of his cistern. Verse 32. Until I come and take you away to a land like your own. I'm going to drop down. Verse 33. This is the king of Assyria talking to our forefathers, telling them, don't you believe, Hezekiah? Your God Yahuwah is not going to save you from me. He cannot save you from me. That's what the king of Assyria is telling our forefathers. So I'm going to pick this up, 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 33. And this is the king of Assyria talking. Have any of the gods of the nations delivered at all his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and of Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, Ava? Have they delivered Samaria out of my hand? Who are they among all the gods of the country that have delivered their country out of my hand? That the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand. So the king of Assyria is tooting his own horn. He's telling the Israelites, don't you believe Hezekiah? Check the other nations. Have their gods saved them from me? There's none of your gods can save you from me. So he's telling the Israelites, who is Yahuwah that he's going to save you from me? So again, I'm driving home the point. When you were conquered by another nation, it meant that their God was greater than your God. And why would a conqueror want to worship a captive God? It doesn't make sense historically nor biblically. We're going to continue on. You have to keep things in context when you read the Bible. So let's move on. So let's go back and I guess I'll read one more to drive the point home. Let's go to Daniel chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3, just to drive the point home that when you are a defeated nation, nobody's going to serve your God. It doesn't make sense. It's like, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in olden times. It doesn't make sense today. So let's read Daniel chapter 3. And this is another one of the famous stories. But this goes over your head when you don't have a Hebraic understanding of the scriptures. So this is Daniel chapter 3, and we'll pick it up at 28. Daniel 3 and verse 28. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who have sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any God except their own God. Verse 29. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. So again, you know this famous story. Nebuchadnezzar built a statue, told everybody under his rule, including the Israelites, when you hear the music, wherever you are, you bow down and worship this statue. Our forefather says we don't worship anybody but the God of heaven, and the Babylonians threw them into the fiery furnace. Our ancestors did not cry, did not beg for their lives. They began to worship the Most High inside this furnace. The Most High sent his angels and protected them. When they came out, Nebuchadnezzar pulled them out, and he burnt all the houses of the Babylonians who had snitched on the Hebrews. And he says, burn their houses down to the ground. And not only that, that everyone who says anything against the Hebrew God or the gods of the Israelites are going to be cut in pieces. Again, your God is known by the way you live. So if you're in poverty, people are looking at you like your God is worthless. But it's not so with the Israelites. Only time we're in poverty is if we're under punishment. We're under captivity right now to live out our punishment. So again, it doesn't make sense historically or biblically for someone to come and worship a defeated God. So Paul is not writing to Romans who have now taken over the world. It doesn't make sense. So let's give you some understanding. Let's get First Maccabees 41. First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 41. So if you're new to the Hebrew customs or you're new to the Hebrew thought of the Bible, you're lost when you come to the New Testament. Because if you go to the last book of the Old Testament in the order that the modern Bible has it, Malachi is the last book. And Malachi, our forefathers had just returned back to the land from captivity. A remnant of Israel is back in the land. So then when you turn over to the New Testament, book of Matthew, you lost so much history, but you find out that Israel is now under Roman rule. You missed the whole period where the Greeks were killing us for following our customs. So we're going to give you that. And this again is further evidence